President Obama locked in a standoff with Congress as he gets ready to veto a bill that would allow 9/11 families to sue the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul supports the right to sue, and he's with me now. And Senator, good morning to you. There's a lot of opposition. Perhaps there's enough votes in Congress to override a veto on Friday. Why do you favor the right for an American to take a case against the kingdom?
Well, I think the victims of 9/11 and their families do deserve the right to have their day in court. Doesn't mean they'll win, but they do deserve to have their day in court. The facts deserve to come forward. There was some evidence, the 28 pages that were redacted for 15 years that we weren't allowed to read, or the public wasn't allowed to read. There's some evidence in there that two of the hijackers in San Diego were helped by somebody that was in the employment of the Saudi government. I think that deserves to be explored. The Saudi government has been funding radical schools around the world that teach hatred of the West, hatred of Christianity, and intolerance. And I think they need to change their ways. And hopefully this is a wake-up call to Saudi Arabia. If you want to be friends with America, you got to act like it.
Well, there are a lot of folks in Washington, national security-related types, attorney generals, former, saying this, a letter to folks like you: it will completely undercut sovereign immunity protections upon which the United States and all sovereign nations have relied for centuries, and our troops, our diplomats, and all U.S. government personnel working overseas could very well find themselves subject to lawsuits in other countries. This must not happen. Why are they wrong?
I think already we are subject to lawsuits, but they just don't go anywhere. If you want to sue us in another foreign country, because of the agreements we have as far as defense, if we have troops there, we have a status of forces agreement that precludes that. So I don't think that it necessarily is going to change anything. Right now, if you live in Saudi Arabia and you want to sue America, you can. You can sue us in Saudi courts. You just don't have much chance of collecting anything over here. The same will occur in our country. If someone sues Saudi Arabia, the chances of collecting may not be that great. But I think one of the reasons you want to go to court is you want the truth to come out. And if Saudi Arabia had anything to do with 9/11, we should know about it. If Saudi Arabia is continuing to fund hatred of America in schools in America, we should discuss that. And that's a perfect reason why I've also brought up that we should be discussing whether we sell them arms or not.
Let me ask you about that. There's a $1 billion deal on the table. You are very much against this. Why?
Well, President Obama has sold them $100 billion worth of weapons already. So this is $1 billion more out of $100 billion. He's sold more weapons to the Saudis than any president in our history. But the Constitution was very clear that the initiation of war should be the prerogative and decision of Congress. And we've not been consulted. We've not been asked. The American people haven't been asked. And right now, American planes are refueling Saudi bombers. We're also picking targets for them. Thousands of civilians are dying in Yemen. There's 1 million people displaced in Yemen. And the American people have not gotten a vote over whether or not they're ready for another war. And we're involved in a war in Syria and Iraq, and we've had no vote either.
Is that what you think this leads to?
No, I think what we are currently doing is we are actively engaged in war, and we should be voting on that. So today, this vote is in a way a proxy vote over whether or not we should be at war in Yemen, because refueling planes that are actively bombing, picking targets, means essentially we are at war in Yemen, and yet Congress wasn't asked. Our founding fathers were very clear that this was a prerogative of Congress, not of the president.
I think there's a broader question here, too. Do you consider the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to be allies of the United States, whether it's in Yemen or that 5-year mess that's ongoing in Syria?
Sometimes, sometimes not. I would call them a frenemy. People have described them as both arsonist and firefighter at the same time. I think the Saudis have been indiscriminate in placing arms in the Syrian civil war. I think some of the arms that they placed in the Syrian civil war wound up in the hands of al-Nusra, a branch of al-Qaeda. And I think some Saudi weapons also wound up in the hands of ISIS, either intentionally or unintentionally. But I don't think the Saudis were discriminate. I don't think they did a good enough job trying to determine who are really good people in that war. They just said, we don't like Assad, he's a Shiite, we're Sunnis, we're going to do anything to push back the Shiites. And I think that's a mistake and has led to chaos and the rise of ISIS.
Give me one word answer here. Can you stop it or not? Yes or no?
Maybe. We stopped the Pakistani sale about a month ago. Not directly through a vote, but indirectly.
We will watch it this afternoon. Senator, thank you for your time today. Rand Paul from
Thank you.
Kentucky, thank you.
Very interesting. Lindsey Graham's going to talk about that more.